It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
Well, alright, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about fake news, disinformation, the media lying. It turns out we're going to talk about lies, and that's really what it comes down to. Um, Kind of everywhere we go, social media, which obviously is not necessarily a credible source. I mean, there may be credible sources coming through social media, but
Right.
not that often. Um, and we're going to kind of talk about the idea of how everything really comes from your perspective, right? Two people maybe sitting in a room hear a speech and both hear different things. Now,
Mhm.
we hear the same words, but maybe we hear a different meaning, right? And honestly, some of us older veterans, maybe we hear different words too, who knows? But you get the idea. Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I I think a big part of the stuff that we don't talk about is stories that the news just doesn't report, you know? Um, you flip to CNN, you flip to MSNBC, Fox News, it's all the same stories from a different perspective,
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't get reported,
Yeah.
and, I think that's a big portion of the problem.
Like, example, you got something?
So I
Like,
got a couple.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like, where do you even find these? And that's the thing. Like, they end up in like a local paper, or like they're in the like
Well, I
small
mean,
Gazette, or
it's to me, it's like, I mean, they're events or, studies that are completed that just
well,
nobody
because
knows
they don't
about.
fit the agenda. I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of
so,
like, yeah. Go ahead.
one of the big things, I think we talked a few months ago, we talked about forever chemicals.
Yes,
Um, so, they're finding forever chemicals in rainwater, which is getting into everybody's drinking water, which
obviously.
now it's basically everybody is infected with these chemicals, which are causing health problems.
Mm.
So the news never talked about that because it was a multi-billion-dollar corporation that put the chemicals there, and they don't want everyone to know about it.
No, I wouldn't want people to know about that. DuPont.
Uh,
No, I
let's let's hit another one real quick. Um, Facebook, uh, Twitter, Google, they're all filling up with ex CIA agents and ex Israeli agent, special intelligence agents. So it's kind of like we're now turning big tech into Big Brother.
mm,
Nobody's reporting on that news story. It's happening, but you didn't see that on CNN. They're not going to talk about it.
no. Hey, we're all being bribed, and
Yeah,
that's one of the things. Like, if I search on Google or I search on something less controlled, and maybe it's not even, I don't know how it's been infiltrated or not, but if I search Google and DuckDuckGo, I get a totally different answer.
right, right.
And
Because there are some that are just kind of like removed from the algorithm, and you type in the right words, and it just doesn't. It's not going to show you that result.
so I had remembered after September 11th, this came up at work yesterday, and it was just unrelated. I was like, well, that's not true. But I had remembered that Lloyd's of London was the big insurer for the World Trade Towers, and
Right.
that they didn't really pay. And I
Hmm.
swear that was a news story that it wasn't big news, but it got around,
Hmm.
and people heard it, and it was a thing. And they were the primary insurer, and that they really just were like, "Well, we didn't think that'd happen," and they didn't pay jack, right? Now, mind you, it didn't. I searched it out yesterday, and it didn't really get resolved till 2007. And again in 2009, it was revisited. So, I mean, this happened, and I had heard about it in like 2002 or three, early on, about them not paying and committing to their obligations. Um, but when I was having this debate at work with somebody about it, I go to Google and I search, Lloyd's of London and World Trade Tower insurance. Nothing, not
Right.
one result came up. And I'm like, did I imagine it? Is it? And you start to doubt your own memories, you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, that can't be." But then I was like, "Well, let me try DuckDuckGo," and the work computers are just like naturally set up to have Google at my employer, right?
Mhm.
So I go over to DuckDuckGo and I search it, and sure enough, and I typed in Lloyd's of London. The Lloyd's of London website comes up and says, "We were the primary insurer on," and that was nowhere in Google when
Right.
I was for and they're like, "Yeah, we were, and we were great." And then I'm like, "Wait a minute, that isn't how great."
That's not what Google said.
It said it said, "We were the primary insurer, and we we came through excellent on that one, just like Katrina and COVID." They were a big insurer for COVID. I didn't even know what that's about.
I didn't know
How do
insurance
you
had a
Yeah,
that
they cover
COVID
COVID?
had an
Like,
insurance company.
I guess it was like businesses shutting down, and there was a big article there. But
Mhm.
I dug into it, and it basically ended up saying like they ended up paying like close to 4 billion in the end, but nothing was clear in any article I read. Like I went down
Right.
rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and they're like, well, they paid a little, and 4 billion is obviously more than a little, but
Mhm.
it wasn't what was, justified. But
Right.
anyway,
And I'm
sorry,
sure they had to fight for every
right.
penny of that $4
It
billion
was
dollars.
just, yeah, just the example, that they gave, and it wasn't
Mhm.
them that paid that much, but yeah, it was crazy how things get misrepresented. And like, remember, there was always the story of on September 11th, the day before, Rumsfeld gave that speech where he said, "Oh, by the way, the Pentagon lost, it was like 2.1 or 3.1 trillion or $1 billion
Yeah,
or
huge amount.
whatever." Yeah, I think it was trillion. It was like stupid. And they were like, "Yeah, we don't know." And then 9/11 happened. And now when you bring that up, people are like, "It's not on YouTube. You can't find it."
Yeah.
And if you search for a couple hours, you'll find it in the middle of a speech, like,
Mhm.
accidentally, that YouTube
Right,
didn't
it
ban,
accidentally gets in
but
there.
yeah, that's hard to find, and,
Mhm.
you start to question your reality, and that's the whole thing.
Mhm.
But, sorry, more, fake news, or that's the ones you got for unreported?
Unreported. No, I got 2 more.
Alright, let's go.
2 more. Between, 2012 and 2021, uh, 1,733 environmental activists were murdered. Seems like a lot of people to murder and not have anything about it, but nobody reported on that story.
Yeah, sure. Who reports on things that, journalists, eh.
All right, and the fourth one here. Now, there's a bunch. There was a bunch that these are the only ones I looked into. Proximity to oil and gas extraction sites are linked to maternal health risks and childhood leukemia. So if you live near any place that they're drilling for oil, you might get cancer, and there's nothing you can do about it. But just a heads up. Maybe move out of those spots. I don't know why that wouldn't be a news story. You would think that would be important for the people that live around those places, but nobody reported on that. So,
Right. Well, the big thing, like, we end up when these stories don't get reported, people, a lot of times, depending on the issue and how important it is to people and how much funding they can get, we get these documentaries where they dig down into it and they try and, you know, unmask
right.
the bad situations. And you'll see ones about farming, big pharma, or that there's that Matt Damon one about fracking. That's not a documentary. I think that one, like, they made a movie about it, but it
Oh,
tries to
okay.
like expose a big scandal and whatever. But there's a bunch like that where they dig into, like, shutting down farms for you know, I don't know, raw milk and things like that, right? And they go down these rabbit holes, and even if they expose it, immediately people with money and power kind of show up with, "Oh, that's discredited. Look, it's not real because," and then when you start searching it out, it's like, "Oh, but that's not true because so and so." And the thing is, it may not be true because I don't know. And
Right.
that's the whole thing. That's why it's so scary, is we don't know what reality is. And then when you get AI going like it is, and the way it's able to recreate video and stories and everything else and
Right.
see people saying things, you don't what is reality anymore? It gets completely changed. And that's, we can tell you, "Oh, well, back when the moon landing, those pictures were faked. Look,
Mhm.
maybe they were. I don't know. That's the thing. You don't know what reality is anymore. It was funny. Glenn Beck used to talk a couple of years back. He was given a big thing, and he said, "Look, you won't even be able to recognize what reality is." And he's like, "You need to collect as much history as you can and preserve it." And he's like, "That's why I'm making this museum or whatever, doing what he could do." But the thing is, the idea is because if you don't have the actual stuff, who knows what reality is?
Right. Right.
But honestly, yeah.
There's a big conspiracy theory that the Middle Ages never happened. Did you ever hear about this?
Yeah, they didn't happen?
Yeah, so
No,
there's
I
like
haven't heard that.
4 or 500 years. The thing is, his histories are written about him, but a lot of the like the armor, the swords, all the metal, all that stuff gets melted down and turned into something else when
Right.
it's not useful anymore.
Constantly, yeah.
Right. So they don't have the physical evidence, aside of some castles and some books that they wrote, there's not a whole lot of like historical evidence about it.
Mhm.
And just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it didn't happen, but you know what
Can't
I mean?
prove it.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You can't prove it.
Yeah. That's one of the things I just saw. I was watching a guy. They're doing a whole bunch of archaeology stuff over in Israel, and they say the land of David or whatever, and King David, and that where he was supposed to be, and digging up and searching for clues. Um, Believe it or not, according to archaeologists and mainstream history, if you will, um, King David, aside of the Bible, there was no evidence that he ever existed, and they never found anything until 1993. I mean,
Really.
that's amazing to me that you could go that long
Mhm.
without any artifacts to and then they found some, and now it's, progressing, and they have more stuff and more evidence and whatever. But they weren't even like sure that, he was a real thing, and they were really like, oh, the Bible's, full of it, because it's weird because they find evidence of lots of other stuff, but they didn't find evidence of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean a lot of that stuff is kind of weird. So let's talk real quick about the news agencies that we get our news from. I'm gonna run through well, let's start with Disney. Disney owns ABC, ESPN, and Vice News. But who owns Disney? Primarily the Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and State Street Corporation. Warner Brothers owns CNN, and they're owned by BlackRock and State Street Corporation and Harris Associates. Comcast owns NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, and Telemundo, and they're owned by BlackRock, State Street, and JP Morgan. So you're gonna hear the same names over again. So who owns BlackRock? Well, BlackRock is owned by State Street Corporation and Vanguard Group.
You're like, wait, that's the same guys.
Right. So who owns State Street Corporation? BlackRock, and JP Morgan.
And
And JP Morgan uh, owns Morgan Stanley, which owns large shares in Vanguard Group, BlackRock, State Street Corporation. So it's like the same 4 or 5 corporations that all own stock in each other
in each
and
other, and
the
And
news
guess
station.
where all your retirement money goes when you put it in your 401k if you don't select something else?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say Vanguard Group
Group,
or JP
BlackRock, and
Morgan?
State
Yeah,
Street Corporation.
exactly. You're like, "Wait, what? I'm
Mm-hmm.
paying for them to control me?" And yeah, that
Yep,
sounds right.
you are. Mm-hmm.
You know what's even scarier? I was hearing there's stuff floating around the, uh the the government that in the small back channels that they talk about in dark rooms, and again, probably fake news, but maybe it's not, is that AI, the big powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know how the government in the during like World War II, they used to go and seize people's patents. Like people are always afraid that they come after them with, like, you
Right.
invent a car that runs off water, and the government's like, nope, big oil, shut that down. That's for government, use only, and we
Right.
can't. And they seize the patents. Well, it turns out they're really thinking about going after AI and making it government only. Now imagine if the government had AI, but you didn't have access to it. what
You
kind of
did.
world they could create and shape in your image. You know, you wonder, like, how could they pull off the blind stuff of 1984 where they make you believe a total different reality?
Right.
That's how you do it. And the thing is, they're already doing it now. It's not like they have exclusive control. They can already do it now, you
Yeah.
know,
You know,
shape
the
a
big
world that's not what you believe.
one of the big things in 1984 that they talked about is that they would report the news. You know, they would have
Yeah,
facts, and then one day everything would change. I mean, no, we've always been at war with that country. No, it's always been that way.
yeah.
And like you said, you can go back and Google and look up
Kept
stories that you
going.
remember, and it doesn't exist anymore.
And
You
then
know?
you're like, well, maybe I misheard that. I didn't
Hmm.
know. I'm dumb.
Yeah.
And
Maybe I'm crazy.
right. And you start to question your reality. And
Hmm.
that's where it gets so like hairy. And man, it's unbelievable how much, you know, that stuff shapes reality. And what's worse is, you know, obviously me and Kevin, we're trying to bring you the truth. I'm actually pretty careful. I mean, you could always be more careful, right? I mean,
Hmm.
definitely everything, like I check and make sure that the news site I got it from when I repeat a story is like a real newspaper. But
Right.
that doesn't mean anything. Like,
It
oh, I
doesn't.
got it from the New York Times, so it's true. Well,
Right.
maybe not.
Exactly. It used to
Oh,
be the New York Times would be
like
pretty reliable. You
like
know?
I try and, you know, make sure it's not like the Kevin Gazette or whatever that
Right.
I'm getting your article from. But on the flip side of that, maybe the Kevin Gazette is putting out the truth and the New York Times might not be. You know,
Hmm.
you don't know. And it's so hard to interpret what reality is. And that's, you know, I was pointing out, oh, save your old history books. Well, it turns out your old history books might not have been accurate either.
Right.
And so it's all from the, you know, they say that the winners get to write the history, you know?
Right.
The winners get to write the story.
Yeah.
And
Well, Winston Churchill said that. He said history is going to be kind to me because I intend to write it. And yeah, we don't, you know, you can talk shit about Winston Churchill, but most people think he's a, pretty decent dude, you
and
know?
you wonder why.
Wonder why.
But that's the reality of it. And it's crazy how much that stuff is shaped and changed by, you know, the winner gets to do it. And the same thing like Animal Farm, you know, they talk about the pigs had a list of rules that they would write on that they had a chalkboard. And it turns out one of the cool things about a chalkboard is that you can erase it and
You
change it.
just erase it. Yeah.
And that's why they're so big. Remember, all the textbooks in schools now are digital for the most part in elementary schools. I mean, obviously, it depends on the budget. If you're in a poor place, you might still have your old school paper textbooks. But the big
Yeah.
thing is everything
Poor
is
kids down
digital
in Mississippi and Alabama getting
now. Right.
actual facts
They're getting
and
actual textbook information because they have the
that
same
doesn't
book
change
from
every day.
1964. But the uh the thing is, they can rewrite history at the end of the year and it's different next year. And you're saying,
Hmm.
Chuck, that would never happen. And okay, okay, that's all I can say.
Yeah. You're probably right. No, not going to happen. Yeah. Now, one of the biggest problems we had was in who owns what news sites and why they're all owned by the same people is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Basically, it deregulated ownership, allowing a small number of conglomerates to control most of the media. Now, that wasn't the intention of it, but they didn't, they were the ones that wrote the act. You know what I mean? The telecommunication companies were the ones that wrote this bill, and it just got passed by Congress and the Senate. And Congress and the Senate is going to, pass whatever bill makes them most likely get reelected.
And
So, I mean,
and that's the thing, like in order to like pass something, you know, everybody's like, well, I'll agree to it as long as I can write in my little back door that I'll be able to do what I still want. You
hmm,
know, and that's the
right,
thing with these bills. You always kind of you know what is it they say? It would be cool to have a clean bill, meaning it just does its intended purpose without
right,
anything, but that never happens. That's not
right.
usually the reality.
Do you
Now again,
remember?
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
know, let's talk about the first amendments to the Constitution. They're not even bills. They're the Constitution amended, you know, Bill of Rights.
Right.
Each one of those is like 2 sentences long. You know
As
what I
it
mean?
should be.
Straightforward.
The Constitution, the whole framework of our government is laid out in like I don't know, what's it, probably like 10 pages if you had it typed out and
Right.
printed. I mean it's really like 2 pages, but if you spread it out in reality, it's not
Uh-huh.
much.
Right.
And they were somehow able to shape an entire new country and lay out a government, and they could do it in 10 pages, but now every bill we have is like 1,000 pages. And you're like,
Right.
"Really?"
And no senator or congressman that votes for or against a bill has read any of it. You know what I
Or
mean?
even if you have, you completely understand it because
Right.
it could be just one sentence, one strange word in there that can really reshape powers and give people more. And that's where it gets crazy. The big thing with fake news and disinformation is that once these stories get out, it's hard to retract it. MIT did a study and said that fake news spreads 6 times faster than actual news. Now, obviously, because it's meant to be scandalous or salacious, that's why we get clicks and
Mhm.
views and that kind of thing. But when you correct it, nobody cares.
Right.
One of the stories I had talked about, there was some weird. I thought I remembered some kind of Ben Carson affair story that discredited him. Maybe it was in my imagination because when I looked it up, I didn't see anything. I'm like, I don't know, it just
Doesn't
disappeared.
exist anymore.
Because that's how things go. But when I did search Ben Carson stuff, there was a story about his his uh his office had spent $31,000 on office furniture, and it wasn't approved by Congress, and how dare he, whatever. And then like later I found an article, oh, he was cleared of all that. But it didn't say why. It didn't say he didn't do it. It said, and I'm like, oh, well, I know he seems to be a really honorable guy, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It's I don't know what that means. And that's the whole thing is they can shape your perception just by printing a story that may or may not be true or based in fact. And if you put a correction, it's like, "Oh yeah, I put it out there. I said I was wrong. Sorry." You know,
Mhm.
so sad.
Right. Right. Well, I think a lot of that stuff is intentional, you know? You
Mm.
just all you have to do is float a story, like I'm gonna do right now.
Oh,
So, Twitter, you know, big news source for a lot of people, which it
Twitter.
shouldn't
Yep.
be because anybody can say whatever they want.
Kevin, it's really X. I don't know why you would try and slander the
X,
company like
formerly known as Twitter, the
all right.
company formerly known as Twitter.
That's like when I tell you about Prince, it's the same
Uh-huh,
thing. All
exactly.
right. Go on.
Same dude, actually. Yeah. So, a lot of rumors have been going around about a guy named Adrian Dittman.
Okay.
All right. So,
I've
so
not heard
he
of Adrian Dittman.
yeah, on online debates, he always backs Trump or I'm sorry, Musk, right? He criticizes Musk's opponents. He shares the same vocal signatures as Elon Musk.
Mhm, mhm.
He refers to Musk in the first person, like he talks about Musk but says I. Any user that has called him out on being the same person gets banned from Twitter.
Yeah.
So I was looking at some of these tweets, and like one was a picture of Elon Musk carrying his kid around on his back, and he Adrian Dittman posted on there, "You're such a good father, Elon
Such
Musk."
a good dad.
Yeah, but it's probably the same person. Just don't say that out loud because you'll get in trouble for it.
Well, as long as you're not on Twitter, you're probably good.
Hmm.
I could lose all 150 followers I have on Twitter, so,
Yeah, so it doesn't
that
really.
could be
I mean, that's half of our listeners, though. Honestly.
oh, our audience would drop off like that. That's
Hmm.
the thing, the online world, I hate to say it, has there are consequences, but they're not the same as reality, right? Like,
Hmm.
if I come up and say, "Kevin, you know what? You're a fat loser and you look dumb," I might get punched in the face. But if I go online on social media and I'm like, "Ah, Kevin, you're a fat
Mhm.
loser and you look like you're dumb or
You
whatever."
get thousands of likes on that one.
Thousands of likes, and it just goes on, like, nobody, nothing. I have no consequences.
Right.
Now, there are a few times there's backlash, maybe I talk about this Dipman guy and, I get banned from Twitter. That would be a consequence, and then I would be sad,
Mhm.
and little hurt in my heart, like, "Oh, I can't go on Twitter," that. What I always wonder is, how come everybody's a little bit prettier on the internet? Have you noticed this?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on
Except
because
for me, I mean, I don't know how the
yeah,
filters work,
exactly.
that's
I don't
the
know how they
problem.
do that because I'm ugly as sin still.
If somebody knows how to make me and Kevin look pretty, then we
Mhm.
could do that, that would help, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to start doing like, lipstick, makeup, eyeshadow, maybe some fake eyelashes will help us out. I don't know.
you don't even need that anymore. There's, like, skin smoothing filters and skin tone adjustments and
Well, I'll tell you what, if we got on there and got the right filters where we could turn ourselves into hot women,
yeah,
our podcast
people
would
would
like
watch
go
this
through
show,
the roof.
I'll
Yeah,
tell
they
you
would
what.
go through the roof. Show off a bunch of cleavage. Things would be great.
Yep, yep. We need to do that. Have somebody edit it in, just cleavage. I've seen that they can do like cartoon episodes where people become like cartoon characters,
Right. Right. And
and
the cartoons
we
always look
could
a lot
switch
better than
to
the people do.
right, and we could switch to attractive people. Who
Mhm.
knows? So the thing is, the more clicks and likes you get, the more chance you have to make money. And you know what I'm noticing though? The internet's dropped out on me like 3 times, and while we've recorded this, and I'm using Starlink, and I'm wondering, Kevin, it might be because you
We
exposed
should have
that
we
story.
should have kinda kept our
Maybe
mouths
you
shut.
should have kept your mouth shut, and we wouldn't have these problems with, internet connection. I'm just saying. And now all of a sudden the government's calling you. I'm
Yep,
seeing a
they're all
distraction.
contacting me. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. One of the things too is your mind actually can play tricks on you. So there's actually some reality to what you remember might not be accurate.
Mhm.
And because basically we remember events, but your mind fills in the gaps of, well, this probably happened. Like, it's one
Mhm.
of those things, like, if you tell a lie to yourself kinda and to people as more and more, you actually start to believe it, or you start to believe, like, more of the details.
Right.
You fill it in. But there was a lot of studies with the CIA where they would kinda create memories. I know we talked about this in the past of, where they suggest, "Well, remember that time at the wedding you dropped the cake and everyone
Mhm.
was and people are like, 'Oh, yeah, and at first it's like, "No, that didn't happen." And then, "Didn't it? Are you sure? Because don't you remember your uncle Bill was
Mhm.
there and Bill said this and you're like, "Maybe that does sound familiar."
Mhm.
But and then you start to fill in the gaps. So sometimes it's not even your fault. Like, maybe all these politicians who are lying to us all the time, maybe it's because 'cause they're just confused.
If you were to tell me that the majority of congressmen and senators
We're
in the United
confused.
States are confused, shocked. I would be
Yeah,
shocked. Do you remember that, that just happened? Was it a senator or a congressman? They she hadn't voted in, like, 6 months, and then all of a sudden they found her in an old folks home for people that are confused. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but it was a pretty big deal, you know? She was just in an old folks home with dementia, and nobody had noticed that she had been missing for 6 months.
right? No,
Mhm.
I feel like that happens. I don't know. I just well, there was that one guy, that one congressman who was like, "Yeah, I don't think we can put any more troops in Guam. I'm afraid to approve this bill because what if the island flips over if we put too many in there?"
I'll just
And I'm
you know what
like,
I'm
"Yeah,
saying?
sure, that could happen. That
Right.
sounds right."
That sounds
But
right. Flip over, not even sake, just
no, no, he
flip
didn't
right
say
over.
sink. He said it could flip over, and I'm like, "Yeah." And we vote for these guys.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
What are you gonna do, though? Alright, so, Yeah, so clickbait is one of those big ones that really kind of like drives a lot of the garbage that's on the internet, you know? And you know it because you see, you see those articles and those websites, and you're like, oh, what does that old Hollywood star look like today?
Right,
You
right.
know? And you go on the shit, and it's, you have to click a link to click another
And
link,
there's like a
and you
thousand
scroll
ads
through the
in
story
between,
to yeah,
and you're like, no.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you realize the story is just made up bullshit to begin
right,
with, you
right.
know? But tricked you. And I found like 500 of those while I was just preparing for
Yes,
this episode. You know what I mean? I came across like 80 of those. I'm like, oh, here it is. This is what I was looking for. And nope, nope, it's just bullshit, you
right,
know?
right. And that's it. You're like, oh yeah, I can go down this road, and it's so hard. And the thing is, it's flashing in front of you over and over again. You're seeing the same stuff. And it's like, oh, I did hear it. But it's even weirder that like your feed is curated to you. So whatever things you like and you want to do, you're going to see more of it. So like if I like really attractive brunettes with brown eyes and whatever, then I'm going to see more really attractive brunettes. Well, if
Hmm.
I like hardcore conspiracy theories about UFOs, turns out I'm going to see a lot more hardcore conspiracy theories about UFOs. And if I like things that tell me that the planet is burning up and, man's causing it all and it's the evil fossil fuels, I'm going to see a lot of stories about the planet burning up and fossil fuels and evil. And, that's the thing. So it kind of it tells you what you want to hear. And the thing is, you can go down the other road. Like there's that show Landman, and he gives it's that Billy Bob Thornton or whatever, and it's written by the guy who wrote Yellowstone, Taylor Sheridan, I think. And
Hmm.
that one, the guy gives again. I don't know what reality is. It's a TV show, so I can't swear that what he's saying is the truth. But he gives a speech about building a big wind turbine is going to take more fuel to build it, get it into location, use a crane, set it up, keep it lubed up to work. It's going to take as much fossil fuels as you could have used to produce the energy that it's going to
Hmm.
make. And you're kind of like, yeah, that sucks. But it doesn't mean that's true. Nobody said this is a fact, but they
Right.
planted that in my head because it's there. Now, I kind of think it's a fact. It affirms other things I've read, but I don't know.
Hmm.
That's one of the things. It's like, well, it could be, but it might
Yeah.
not be.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean, the beauty of this country is that you can say whatever the hell you want. The drawback is that, you can say whatever you want. And, it doesn't have to be based in fact. It doesn't even have to have any relationship to the facts,
right,
but you can say it. It's our obligation to listen to that shit and then follow up. You can believe it or not, but you have to look it up. And who has time to like go deep into every single thing that you've ever read or saw or heard,
right.
It's just not possible.
No, exactly. Um, that's the thing. We can only do so much digging and so much research, and you have to either say credible, not credible, and dismiss it, or discard, like don't
Mhm.
know, don't care. And that could be. And you have to the thing is you have to search every story. And like I said, even Google just rehashes the same stuff back to us. We don't know the inner workings. And I gotta say, and I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating that articles now are like 3 bits of information, and it's usually like scandal. Like this guy stole $5 million and he spent it at the nudie bar. And I can get that same headline repeated over and over again, and yet I can't get any details like, oh, he used a black Jeep and he drove and smashed into this store. And you don't get the details unless the details are the salacious story they're trying to sell. You only
Mhm.
get the details they want, or he did it because his babies were all dying of cancer and, that guy did something to him. It just, it's we see the story they want to paint. We don't see reality. It's funny. My sister used to work for a news station, a TV news station, and she would write the copy for it. And she would she would say the that they would get like a 3 paragraph story, and you would write the news clips that they would repeat, like the news talks about a story every half hour or hour, and
Right.
you would get like a new sentence in each one.
Mhm.
Like, so you'd get like another little clue to what's the reality, but you'd never get like the full story at once because we're going to give 30 seconds to this topic. But that
Right.
way, as you hear it all day long, on the radio, the little news break or whatever thing
Mhm.
you'd get, and hers was, TV, whatever. But each segment, you see those morning shows, you're getting like another clue and they kind of hang you there, but you never get like the full story. And
Right.
it's so hard to dig down and get the actual facts. And you have to spend hours and hours of research. And that's, next we could be landing on the moon, right? I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't
Well,
know
I
what
mean,
the facts are.
it is one of those things though that's like, the 24-hour news cycle. They'll
Yeah,
hit on a story, never get in depth, and by the next day, that's gone. You know
it's
what I
gone.
mean? It's whatever you heard yesterday, that's yesterday's news. It's not important anymore,
And
you
that's the
know?
beauty of what is it, the Friday afternoon drop, where
Mhm.
anything they kind of have to disclose. These are the stories that you found. They came
Right.
out on the Friday afternoon, and by Monday, that's old news.
That's old news.
Everybody
Nobody
knows.
talked about that
Right.
after work because there is no after work.
Yeah. I went
Monday,
at 5 o'clock
Sunday,
on
Saturday,
Friday. I was
Sunday,
already
it's
at the
gone.
bar, and I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's reality. But again, it's all about how you perceive it and how your mind hears it. And I'm just saying, take everything with a grain of salt and just be cautious with it. And maybe don't be so quick to repeat it, which I mean, we all do, right? I mean, a good story is a good story.
Mhm.
Uh, but before you act on things, kind of dig into the truth a little bit. And that's all. Because, just because somebody says that me and Kevin are ugly doesn't mean that that's true.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you know?
Exactly.
I'm pretty on the
I am the
inside.
beholder. I can't even talk today. It's a bad one. But the problem is we have the chat on the side, and I kind of am like, I need to answer that. I need to talk to people.
Mhm.
Who knows? Um,
But
that's the thing. Like Chris is like, did we land on the moon? And I gotta say, that's the question. Did we land on the moon? We got to keep you guessing. Um, I don't know. All I can say is watch the Y Files on YouTube. That guy's got some entertaining stuff, and he'll keep you guessing. I don't
yeah,
know.
it is pretty good.
Yeah, that guy. Another one. I don't know. Again, I'm going to save it for the after show. So,
Okay.
you guys have questions, concerns, things you want to tell us about? Um, you can email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. And we really appreciate you guys staying in touch with us and telling us things. Also, you want to follow things, you could join the Prepping Badass group on Facebook. I absolutely love you guys there. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave reviews, comments, Spotify, iTunes, wherever, iPhone podcasts, whatever it is, Apple Podcasts, wherever
Mhm.
it is that you're downloading this. Keep it up because we really appreciate it. It helps grow the brand and we love it. Again, things you want to hear about, let us know. So, with that, I would say stay safe and we will talk to you guys next week.